founder of Hearts and Homes for Refugees. And with me is Amy Robertson, and my program director of Hearts and Homes and the board of directors. And we welcome you all here this evening. A couple of housekeeping notes. We will be recording this session. The chat is open for questions and comments. Many of you have sent in those questions. If you have others who questions you didn't get to ask, please put it in the chat. We'll try to get to it. The congressmen have to have other engagements, so we don't want to hold them and we don't want to go over, but we want to make sure we get all of our important questions to them. Please make sure you're muted so we can hear all the pearls of wisdom from around the Zoom tonight. And raise your hand if you have any technical questions. With that, welcome to the 2021 Town Hall, Building Welcoming Communities, hosted by Hearts and Homes for Refugees. On behalf of the board and all of us here, we welcome you. Exciting lineup of speakers, but before we hear from them, I wanted to show something to all of you that I first saw when it was in previews, along with a network of leaders from grassroots organizations around the country. It's from a campaign called Belonging Begins With Us, and it's a joint project from the Ad Council and the Center for Inclusion and Belonging. The goal of this brilliant multi-year data-driven campaign is to advance a more welcoming nation where everyone can belong.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. If you could see you through my eyes instead of your ego, I believe you'd be surprised to see that you've been blind. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Yeah, before you abuse, criticize and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Unmute, Kathy.
I said, I love that. Every time I see it, I feel like I've seen it for the first time. The grassroots welcoming movement in Westchester County has been building bridges and encouraging belonging since 2016. This work and the connections have contributed to changing the culture and avoiding narratives of othering while bringing us together to build stronger and inclusive communities. Today, you'll hear from some of the ways we've been building welcoming communities the last 4 years. But as volunteers have been tirelessly advocating, integrating, and caring for our new neighbors, Hearts and Homes has dedicated itself to building whole communities. We believe our mission is to serve not only refugees, but the receivers, those looking to connect with their new neighbors. We make sure there are opportunities for the helpers to get involved and to act on their humanitarian impulses. It is commonly heard in this space that we all work in that this is life-changing. The common denominator is very simple. Everyone has been resettling, assisting, and advocating for refugees these past 5 years, acting on their faith teachings or from their hearts. But no matter what, everyone aspires to uphold the American tradition of welcoming. And over the past 5 years, I think we all know this, over 100 or nearly 100 refugees have been resettled by 13 community sponsor groups in our Westchester communities. And it's wonderful to see so many of the selfless volunteers and our wonderful partners here with us tonight, including Catholic Charities, like Kelly, HIAS, IRC, Neighbors for Refugees, Interfaith Council for New Americans, and River Towns for Refugees. Welcome to all of you. You are part of a dynamic network of partners and supporters. Your involvement and collaboration with Hearts and Homes for Refugees has sustained the welcoming movement through 4 years of anti-refugee sentiment and a pandemic. And despite an administration that successfully dismantled the refugee program and admitted fewer refugees to resettle here, there was and there continues to be a robust outpouring of goodwill turned assistance and advocacy for new neighbors here and throughout the tri-state area. Many of you have been part of the long list of programs, from resettling refugees, community drives, COVID relief, outreach, and community engagement opportunities, postcarding meetings with leaders and other advocacy efforts. The goal is to keep this energy alive, inspire more welcomers, volunteers, partner supporters, and our newly elected representatives, Congressmen Bowman and Jones. A little bit about the program to keep this energy alive. I can think of no one better than my longtime friend and mentor, Chris George from Iris in Connecticut. I can't wait to share a little story about Chris when I introduce him later in the program. And finally, last week was National Volunteer Week, and I think it's appropriate that we will conclude our program by hearing from the engines behind welcoming refugees, a few of the volunteers. We want to make sure to leave you with exciting ways and ideas that you can start or continue engaging with us as volunteers or partners and supporters in small and large ways. But first, I think we have this next guest, our guest. I want to turn to the top of the county, where the tone of welcoming has long been set by our next guest. I'm so happy that County Executive George Latimer is with us here to say a few words. In 2016, a few of us met with George at City Limits Diner to share our hopes for resettling refugees, and we asked him for a statement, which we then shared with our grassroots supporters. I wish I had the napkin he'd written that on, but even better, we continue to have George and is a strong advocate for our work and for building welcoming and inclusive communities. So I'd like to turn this over to George. Thank you so much. Hello.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate the opportunity to bring greetings. I'm a little disheveled as we run around the county, getting back home in time to be part of this. This organization has done a lot to help a lot of people's lives, but the challenges continue before us. So I look at whatever we've done up to this point is really the beginning of what we're capable of doing. The people of Westchester County, not the government of Westchester County, but the people of Westchester County are to the greater extent willing to share their heart, their home, and their resources to help other people. And I think that's an encouraging sign. We have longer to go, and there are other places that need to ramp up as well, so that from one end of this nation to the other, we do what we can do for those who are in need. I'll just briefly mention that today I was at my religious service, my Roman Catholic service, and the gospel reading was the one of the Good Shepherd. When it speaks of it, whether you are an adherent to a particular religion, the mission of the Good Shepherd, as was laid out in this particular piece of scriptural reading, was that the Good Shepherd lays their life down for all the sheep and reaches out to even one sheep if it isn't in the flock and it's endangered. And when I heard that, I thought of exactly what this group has taken on as its mission, to make sure that we're reaching out to all of the people everywhere, not just the ones who look like us, not just the ones who have need already in our immediate world, but for people who have that need wherever they may be. And I think in that regard, whatever our faith tradition is, then we're doing the work of an Almighty when we try to do what's right, simply what's right, to help people in need, and to do that with our heart, with our house, with our hands, and to do that as a family together. And hopefully Westchester will continue to be a good partner to this organization and to help the people in need as you identify them from anywhere in the world. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you so much, George. So true. Very, very true. Thank you. And now, this evening, we are honored to have with us our esteemed Congressmen Jamaal Bowman and Congressman Mondaire Jones. These two have massive responsibilities as first-term members of Congress, and they certainly stepped into their roles at an interesting and challenging time in our country. And this may be the first time many of you have met your representatives. I think this is the first opportunity they have had to meet the welcoming movement. And those of you here today who are proof that grassroots communities are a powerful force here in the 16th and 17th districts. We appreciate all they are doing to represent us in the nation's capital. To say they're busy is an understatement. So I especially appreciate their taking the time on a Sunday evening to be with us. I know I speak for all of your constituents here tonight to say thank you for taking time. I thought we should start by giving you each an opportunity to introduce yourselves and say a few words. And then we are going to open it up for questions that have come from the audience before this evening and any others we have time for that show up in the chat. Our board member, Bob Tracy, will be fielding those questions. But in the meantime, let's start with you, Congressman Mondaire Jones. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for that very kind introduction. There is no place I would rather be right now. And I want to thank also the members of Hearts and Homes for Refugees for organizing this important event and for all the work that you do to make our community welcome and to uplift refugees. This is absolutely vital work, and we are grateful for all that you do. The United States, as you know, has a long history of opening its doors to people seeking a safe refuge. In fact, in our history, the United States has permanently resettled more refugees than all other countries combined. At our best, this country gives displaced people the opportunity to live and to thrive. And we must ensure that this tradition continues. But we know what happens when we don't live up to those values. I think often of the story of the St. Louis, the ship that contained 937 Holocaust refugees that the United States sent back to Europe, where most of the people aboard met their demise. We should have learned our lesson then, and it's shameful that we're still making the same mistakes today. I was encouraged to see the refugee cap was lifted from a shamefully low 15,000 to 62,500, although it is still lower than where I'd like for it to be. I hope that the Biden administration keeps its promise to raise the cap to 125,000. Because the fact is, refugees make our country stronger. They are our friends, our neighbors, our classmates, our fellow congregants. They are valued members of our community. Everyone who joins us here in Westchester and in Rockland County, which I'm also proud to represent, should feel welcome. We are lucky to have the support of organizations like Hearts and Homes for Refugees, a truly special community-based resettlement program. There is simply no better way to integrate into a community than to be welcomed by its members. Community-based resettlement programs provide an opportunity for cross-cultural exposure and foster the ability to break down barriers and combat stereotypes. We need that now more than ever. People thrive when they feel supported, and it's my goal to do what I can to make sure that refugees feel affirmed here in the Lower Hudson Valley. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm so glad to hear that and to hear of your support and belief in this work that so many people and different groups are doing here in Westchester County. And I'm glad that we can count on you. Now I would like to turn this over to Congressman Jamaal Bowman. I think that you're here.
Yes, I'll spotlight him in just a second. I see you, I see you.
I see you. Hello, welcome.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you all this evening. I love the name Hearts and Homes. First of all, that name can be the values that drive our office and what our work is rooted in. I'm so honored and blessed to be a representative of Westchester County and so excited. And I'm always smiling when I see my brother and friend, Mondaire Jones, on one of these calls with me. It's just such a pleasure to go to Washington on a consistent basis and fight for justice, fight for equity, fight for equality, and to fight for those who are coming to this country seeking asylum. Anyone who is coming here who is a refugee, who needs a home, who needs health care, who needs a job, who needs dignity, and who needs just safety and security. It has always been our role as a nation to provide that safety and security, and we will fight to continue to do so. Every policy we put forth, and I'm saying we because I'm going to speak for my brother Mondaire, every policy we put forth, it's about love. It's about love for humanity, and it's about human rights. If we as a nation become a human rights leader once and for all, we can change what's happening in our world with all of the wars and famine and issues related to climate change. But most importantly, we can be accepting of refugees who are seeking peace and safety and security in our nation. You know, Westchester, has this, or used to have, a reputation of being dismissive or operating with its arms out to people who are coming to Westchester seeking safety. And it's just great to see organizations like this one working to bring people in and support them with the care that they need. You know, a few weeks ago, my office introduced the Care for All agenda. And that's all about uplifting the care economy and the care community. But it begins with not just caring for ourselves and our families and our communities, but also caring for others who are different than us. Because to Mondaire's point, when we can come together across our beautiful differences, we learn so much from each other, and it gives us the opportunity to build a better world. So I'm here with you in this fight, in love and in joy and in solidarity, fighting against anti-hate, anti-Asian hate, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, all the phobias and isms that keeps us separated and segregated and divided. I just look forward to focusing on human rights and humanity and building a better world with you all. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, Bob, we have some questions for our guests who I feel like, we are listening and they're preaching to the choir, but we want to hear and really ask some of the questions that are on top of everyone's minds tonight.
Great, thank you, Kathy. And I'd just like to start by asking guests if they're willing to rename themselves with their congressional district in, so the Congress folks can see where we're all from. And just remind you all to stay on mute while we're doing this. And if you didn't get a chance to send a question in beforehand, I think people have already started to put some questions in the chat, but continue to do so, and we'll go through as many of those as we can get to. So I'd like to start, and again, these questions will be to both Congress people, and I'll start Bowman Jones on the first and Jones Bowman on the second. But we'd like to start with something on everybody's minds these days. With a little over 4 months remaining in fiscal year 2021, less than 3,000 refugees have been resettled. Now, there are 35,000 refugees that have been cleared and are ready to be resettled, and 115,000 more are in process. Now, President Biden did promise to build back better after the previous administration gutted the refugee resettlement program. And he did start with a commitment to cap the numbers at 62,500. But last week, contrary to prior statements, to increase the number and to increase it again in 2022 to 125,000, there was a stunning announcement from the White House that the resettlement numbers would remain at 15,000, the lowest in the history of the program. And there was an immediate strong outcry, and the announcement was quickly walked back, saying that it would be revisited in mid-May. So I guess our initial question is, what do you think of the limitations on the number of refugees to be accepted by the U.S. as recently announced by the president? And what do you think our policy should be?
So I think we need to do a complete 180 from where we were during the last administration. And some of the comments that have come out of the White House indicates that we're moving far too slowly in that regard. We need to act urgently and swiftly to make sure we raise this cap. I think the number, and I think Mondaire is with me, I think the number should be 125,000. And I think we need to get there as quickly as possible. We've been in communication with the White House about this particular issue. I believe Mondaire has as well. But that is my take on this particular situation.
Thank you. Congressman Jones, did you want to add anything on this?
No, I would just reiterate that the cap should be 125,000. That is what the president promised on the campaign trail. And I was disheartened last week. You know something's wrong when the speaker and the Speaker of the House, and you got Dick Durbin, #2 in the Senate, are also decrying what had initially come out of the White House. last week, and so I'm glad that the number was increased to 62,000. But we've got to get it up to 125,000. That was the promise of this president on the campaign trail, and that is the promise of this nation, I think, to the rest of the world.
Thank you. With only 4 months left to go in the fiscal year, the reality of resettling even the 62,500 refugees will be a challenge, if not impossible, given the state of the kind of the gutted resettlement program. Can you talk about this? How do you feel about supporting at least a symbolic number of 62.5 in this fiscal year to finish this up, and a promise to physically bring in at least 35,000 this year? Would that be something you would support? That's a question someone had. And Congress, we'll start with Congressman Jones this time.
Well, it should be 125,000, and I feel like we have the capacity to do precisely that. So look, I mean, if I support the resettlement of individuals and families, and so the more of that we can do, the better.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also want to mention another problem that's been shared with our office from the White House is the problem of reconnecting the children who are already here with families who are here, family members who are here as well. There seems to be a lack of infrastructure in place and systems in place to do that efficiently and effectively. So there's a backlog that needs to be handled as well. It just seems like we haven't thought through the infrastructure or the resources to bring in the 62,000, let alone 125,000, but then to reconnect those at the border with the family members who are already here and have already been identified. The vetting process is taking way too long, and the White House, last time we've spoken with them, is looking for answers to that particular question: how to make vetting more efficient.
Thank you. And this may just follow up on that. This next question we received is about, do you have any key policies or legislation that you plan to introduce or to support on behalf of refugees that you've not already supported?
So our office supported recent immigration legislation, HR 6 and 8, I believe it was. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mondaire. I get them mixed up sometimes. Not in conversations at the moment for any ongoing legislation. We will be, but not at the moment.
And Congressman Jones?
Yeah. So Jamal just referenced that one of them, the No Ban Act, and a number of other pieces of legislation. Let me also just say there's an appropriations letter that calls for increasing funds for refugee support and resettlement, specifically $4.94 billion for the Department of Health and Human Services Refugee and Entrant Assistance Account, $4.12 billion for the Department of State's Migration and Refugee Assistance Account, $50 million for the Department of State's Emergency Refugee and Migration Assistance Account, $5.27 billion for the USAID and for its IDA account. And so this was a letter that I signed on to the Appropriations Committee, in addition to supporting the No Ban Act, which, as many of you know, would bar any future president from ever issuing anything like Trump's Muslim ban. And I look forward to supporting the GRACE Act, which would require the president to set the annual ceiling of refugees to at least 95,000 when it is reintroduced, I should say, this Congress. I also hope to work with my colleagues to address the growing problem of people displaced by environmental disasters and climate change. And our colleague, Nydia Velasquez in particular, who we both know and work with very closely, does particularly good work in this space. And so I look forward to joining forces with her.
I'm also on that letter that Mondaire mentioned.
Great.
Yep.
So this is really about advice for us, this next question. How can we work together to supporting your efforts to advocate for refugees? And what do you need from us as refugee advocates? And how can you support, I guess the follow-up to this was, and how can you support the grassroots efforts on behalf of your constituents who welcome, assist, and advocate for refugees?
I think it's your turn, Mondaire.
Organizing at the grassroots level. That's how Jamal and I won our campaigns, and that's certainly how we've been leading still in the Congress. But we need your help, and that means organizing rallies that we can attend, and we can be supportive of organizations in other ways. I know that we want to both keep a close relationship with all of you to know that the challenges you're facing, so that we're able to resolve them at the federal level. The work that you do oftentimes informs what we do in Washington on a policy level. Being able to bring these stories with us are so powerful. I think of all the floor speeches in the House that have been particularly compelling, and the conversations and committee hearings that have been particularly in testimony that have been particularly compelling, and its narratives, its narration, it's humanizing this issue. And you have all been doing a particularly effective job at that, and we've just got to keep it up. So for those of you who haven't already been doing it, which I don't think is a problem that any of you have, make your voices heard, and that goes for everyone everywhere, including people not on this call tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to underscore everything Mondaire just mentioned, and just add, continuously be in communication with our office. The more we can hear from you in terms of what's going on the ground, the more we can hear those stories, the more we know what legislation to fight for, what legislation to introduce, and what to advocate for as well. So we want to be in consistent communication with you. That's going to be key, as well as your communication with leadership, both on the House side and the Senate side, because quite often legislation moves through the House, passes the House, and goes nowhere in the Senate. And sometimes it doesn't even move through the House the way it needs to. So your communication with Speaker Pelosi, Majority Leader Hoyer, Majority Whip Clyburn, Chairman Jeffries, as well as Chuck Schumer, who's now the Senate Majority Leader. I hate to throw him under the bus, but if he hears from you on a particular issue as the Senate Majority Leader, he has a lot of power to get things moving. And then lastly, if you are connected to other networks across the country fighting this same fight, the more we can move senators in other states and representatives in other states, that's also very powerful as well.
I would just like to step in here and say something. That's so true. The network across the country has been very important, and Hearts and Homes is part of a national network of grassroots organizations, and did recently, along with all of those here from Hearts and Homes in Westchester, send a letter to President Biden about the presidential determination. So, speaking up is not a problem for any of us on this call and in this network. And one of the issues that's particularly important, and I see there are a couple of questions, has to do with the SIV. And as we withdraw from Afghanistan, we are all very concerned about those families, SIV families, who will be at greater risk than they already have been. And as you probably know, a number of SIV from Afghanistan have been resettled in our communities. So they're our neighbors and friends. And beyond that, there's great concern about what's going to happen, and how can we continue to open our doors here, and what could you do to help see that SIV problem through? We have not heard a lot from the White House about the SIVs.
Mm-hmm. So just to reiterate what I just mentioned, when you actions that you are ready to take, the more we could be in communication on those actions, and we can do them concurrently, that brings more power to a particular issue. Like the issue of SIVs is something I need to be much more educated on before I could comment on it. But I'm sure it's something that I support if it involves opening our doors to people who need it, right? So it's really important for us to sort of communicate around these issues. So whenever a letter goes out, or advocacy needs to happen, or something needs to be uplifted, I'm right there uplifting it with you at the same time. So we definitely need to stay in communication about this issue and others you want elevated and uplifted as well.
I agree. Please get in touch with our office about this issue, and we'll see if we can, uplift it.
Right. That's making a lot of people on this Zoom call smile very hard. Amy, I'm not following all the questions. Are there any, Bob or Amy, that you see that we have not asked that we want to ask? We have just a few more minutes of Congressman Bowman and Jones's time.
Okay.
I'll add one here. A question that had come in via email prior to the event. I'm looking forward to working with undocumented immigrant children and teens here in Westchester. This is from an art teacher who will be conducting art workshops. What do our communities need to do to welcome and help young, traumatized, non-English speakers?
Is it my turn?
Sure.
Please.
So great question. Couple things. One, the state is doing a lot more than the federal government in terms of providing resources to undocumented immigrants. I know Mondaire and me were both a part of the state initiative to push for the excluded workers, and thankfully we were able to help bring in $2.1 billion for excluded workers from that perspective. We're also very excited about the resources that are coming into the district that are part of the American Rescue Plan, both for the state, the city, and the county, but also for our school districts. So when I hear arts education and undocumented immigrants, they are in our public schools. So working with school superintendents, the commissioner, school principals, for programming, not just summer program, but after school programming in support of the social and emotional development of undocumented immigrants is going to be key. So there needs to be connection between the individual who asked that question and those who do that kind of work and the school districts, because a lot of resources are coming in for this work in particular.
Thank you. Congressman Jones, did you want to add anything?
It's hard to say more than a former subject of having to welcome children into our community. So I would just associate myself with those remarks.
Perhaps you can be the first to go on the next question is, do you think that TPS guidelines should be modified? And what about TPS as it applies to people who have already entered on temporary protected status, such as the Salvadorans?
Absolutely. I know that District 17 is extremely diverse. District 17, which I represent, has very large immigrant communities. I think of the unrest that is happening in Haiti right now and the fact that it remains elusive for Haitians to receive TPS. And so we have to clarify that it applies. And I think really, which is to say, we need to ensure that it does apply. Just last week, I was having a conversation with multiple members of Congress, and many of them were under the impression that TPS does extend to Haiti. So we need to clarify that once and for all. Haiti should be redesignated. Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, and Cameroon should also be designated. In the long term, I want to see an approach like the DREAM and Promise Act taken to TPS recipients in the United States, where they're given a pathway to citizenship. They are, as I mentioned earlier, our neighbors, and there's no reason that they should be forced to uproot their lives.
Thank you.
Agree with everything he said.
Great. Amy, this one just came in, and this is for the Congressman. This is regarding the processing for refugees. We want to make sure, the question is, will you push the White House to extend the time that prior vetting remains valid so the refugees who've been sort of held up won't have to start over again through the process to get approved?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
I think that's also an issue that we will follow up with, as we have not heard a lot about it, but I think it does need your support, and it needs us to help uplift for you as well. So you'll hear from us on that too.
Yeah, and just so y'all know, Mondaire's like a celebrity in Congress. So anything you want uplifted, you go to him. He could get like 50 signatures on it. Okay, trust me. He's being shy right now.
Much more of a celebrity than I.
No, but seriously though, like we both, we've worked really hard to develop really good relationships with our colleagues And we've both led legislation and letters, and we've gotten a lot of people to support us. I'm really humbled by, when 30 people, 40 people sign a letter, it's incredibly humbling, but it's because of the relationships we've been able to build. So you communicate with us, we collaborate on a letter, we're most likely to get a large contingent of support on a particular letter.
Great.
Great.
Here. All right, Bob, any other questions that we haven't asked?
Let me just see. Somebody just asked if we had to choose the most urgent issue right now, one that we could help move forward with calls, cards, emails, and letters, what would it be? Something that would help you get action in Congress.
Mondaire, you go first.
We can still have a multiracial democracy in this country if we fight for it. But that means we must pass the For the People Act. And when it is introduced, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that requires reforming or repealing, my preference. I know Jamal agrees with me. I would like to completely do away with the filibuster. But I was just listening to Joe Manchin earlier today, so he's not there on that. But I do think we can at least get some exceptions to that Jim Crow relic. And so we need your energy around that. And that includes, letting Majority Leader Schumer know that you care about this issue, and also obviously, Senator Sinema and Manchin and a few others who I believe are hiding behind them as well.
I was going to say the exact same thing, reforming or getting rid of the filibuster completely. It is the one thing that's stopping so many pieces of good legislation from passing in the Senate. HR 1, HR 4, common sense gun laws, immigration reform, democracy reform. It's just stopping so much from happening. And it's really important for Senator Schumer to hear from you on this issue. But also, this is a national conversation as well, because Mondaire mentioned Manchin in West Virginia and Sinema in Arizona. This is a national conversation, a national movement to end the filibuster. So that would be the one thing.
Great. And then there's one question that maybe relates to this a little bit, is because it's so difficult with the filibuster in place as it is, are there executive orders that President Biden could issue that you could recommend with respect to refugees? If we couldn't get something through Congress, I guess.
I'm sure there are. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Maybe Mondaire can. I'm sure they are. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't want to speak for the president, but there are certain pieces of legislation where he'll want to see it do well or pass the House before he acts with an executive order. But none come to mind. I'm sure there is, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stuff that he's been doing thus far by executive action has been very positive. We're still pushing to get that up to 125,000, as we both mentioned earlier. But executive action is no substitute for congressional action. And so, as you think about the best use of your time, Joe Biden has a vast team of people who are working on how to get around Republican obstruction in the Congress in the area of executive action. What we need from you is you to reach out to senators and get them to vote to repeal or reform the filibuster.
Well, thank you both very much for those direct answers and for taking the time to speak with us. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy right now, but thank you both. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before you go, I just want everyone to look at the chat. Kelly Agnew-Barajas, who is the Director of Refugee Resettlement for Catholic Charity Community Services, is on the chat, and she's been adding some of those great pearls of wisdom and knowledge. So she knows a lot about the questions you've been asking, and so please refer to the chat for those. And before we say goodbye, Congressman Jamaal Bowman and Mondaire Jones, thank you so much for your time. You can see there's a lot of passion and interest in this community. Those of us on the call represent a small portion of that passion, and We're here to stay. We're not going anywhere. We got lasted 4 years. We're going to work with a new administration and with both of you and your offices, and we know where to find you. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right. Without further ado, I want to tell a quick story about my next guest. Chris George is founder of IRIS of Connecticut. And in 2016, he was the first person that I reached out to for advice on how we could resettle refugees in Westchester. I liked what IRIS was doing. There wasn't any other organization that was working with community groups to the extent that they were and welcoming refugees to the extent that they were. And my enthusiastic 1 million questions to Chris were answered with very complicated and in-depth advice that went something like this: well, just do it. And that was it. And so in anticipation of a refugee family coming in one day, Hearts and Homes organized its resettlement volunteers into the committees according to the early IRIS manual. And since then, no organization has done more to successfully welcome refugees by partnering with local communities than IRIS. Chris and Ann O'Brien, who many of you know, and the whole team there have played a pivotal role in building and promoting the community sponsorship model. This is so important, and they've been doing it locally and even expanding it nationally. They're getting funders to look with favor on expanding this model. And we hope that we will all be part of the benefit of that, because IRIS does this because they understand, like we do, that everyone is better off when we bring new Americans to our communities in healthy and holistic ways with volunteers as new neighbors. So Hearts and Homes continues to follow IRIS. Some might say, like Ann, Chris, that we stalk IRIS because years later, we believe since day one that investing in and building communities around the community sponsorship model can shift the paradigm of refugee resettlement in this country. I'd like to turn this over to Chris, and thank you again, Chris, for showing up tonight.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Hearts and Homes. I was going through a box of some old files from 2017, and I came across, I think, your very first brochure. Look at that. I have been so impressed with Hearts and Homes. Your determination, your passion, how smart you are, creative you are in figuring out ways to work with refugee resettlement agencies and welcome refugees to your community. We will do more of this. In fact, community-based resettlement is in some ways the future of refugee resettlement in this country. The State Department is now interested in it, and there will be incentives for refugee resettlement agencies to use this model of community-based resettlement. Think tanks that have been writing about refugee resettlement and how to improve on it have all been supporting engaging more Americans in welcoming refugees as the best way to not only increase our numbers, but to build public support. Now, what happened last Friday, it was really a combination of bad news and good news. The bad news is that there was an announcement made that the number of refugees coming to the United States would probably not be more than 15,000 this fiscal year. The good news is the response was fast and furious from all over Washington, nonprofit groups, members of Congress, and immediately, I've actually never seen the White House do an about face and walk back something as quickly as they did. Immediately, they responded and said, oh, well, we really didn't mean that. And, give us another month and we'll get those numbers up again. They won't be 62,500, unfortunately. What the White House said about the impact of the Trump administration on the refugee resettlement program is true. It was decimated. The overseas part of the process is going to take a while to rebuild. But you know what? I think the real reason why they want to have a much lower number of refugees coming to the United States is political. I'm afraid they just don't want to have two hot potatoes. The let's call it a crisis, the crisis at the southern border, and then to announce a dramatically higher number of refugees coming. There was fear that there would be pushback from those who do not support refugee resettlement. Who would not support refugee resettlement? And why are these people still skeptics of the great value of welcoming refugees? It is because for the past 40 years, my colleagues who work in refugee resettlement agencies have not been engaging enough Americans. We haven't been working with or cultivating the development of organizations like Hearts and Homes. We cannot expect Americans to support a refugee resettlement program if they don't know anything about it. And what is the best way to help Americans know something about refugees and refugee resettlement? Is to give them an opportunity to roll up their sleeves and actually participate in this great American tradition of welcoming refugees. That is the only way. When I promote community-based refugee resettlement, it's not to improve services for refugees. And in fact, my main goal is not even to increase the numbers. The main reason why we promote community-based resettlement is to build public support. We want to reach a point in this country. By the way, your elected representatives are amazing. I mean, U.S. Rep. Jones and Bowman, so well informed, so committed to doing the right thing. We want to have a situation in this country so anyone running for public office wouldn't dare stand up in front of a large group during a campaign speech and vilify or scapegoat refugees and immigrants. We want to reach a point in this country where people all across the nation have participated. Millions of Americans have participated in welcoming refugees, have walked refugee kids to school, have shown refugees where to shop, have helped them get jobs, have hired refugees, have tutored them in English, so that when someone's standing up in front of a group of people campaigning for public office starts criticizing refugees, she or he is shouted off the stage by people who look at each other and say, that's not true. Refugees have come to this country for all the right reasons. They're building this country. They're fine people. They work hard. We want more to come. That's where we need to be. And the only way we can get there is to increase engagement of the public in refugee resettlement. That means convincing all of those national organizations, and on HIAS and Catholic Charities and others, you're on the line now. I know that you're more and more interested in using this model. I'm really looking forward to working with you to show you how it's happened in Connecticut. The map behind me shows all of the community groups in Connecticut. There are more than 50 that have stepped forward to welcome refugees. So that map, every state in the country should look like that. At least there should be that many groups who have stepped forward, working with the refugee resettlement agencies to welcome refugees. So thank you very much. You guys are one of the strongest community-based refugee resettlement organizations in the country. Look forward to working with you in the future. And anything we can do to support you, just let me know. You're right. We just need to do it.
You were right. That was exactly what you said. And no holds barred. We did it. And so many people will continue doing that, Chris. Thank you. And as I said to the Congressman, we know where to find you and Ann, and we will find you as we always have. So thank you so much. Speaking of community sponsorship, The next person is going to speak for just a minute is Jane Dixon. Jane is a Hearts and Homes for Refugees ambassador, but more important, Jane has connected with resettled refugees and been involved in bringing them and making them feel like part of our community in a way that we all should take examples. And she and ICNA, her group, and many of her members are on this call. But I wanted Jane to have a couple of minutes to talk about what it means to be a community sponsor. Hello, Jane, and welcome back from Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Kathy. Happy to be back and on this really wonderful call. So even though I only have 2 minutes, I wanted to find a title in order to help me center what I was going to say. And as I was working for it, I thought the way I need to start it is how a family helps to build community. I am a co-chair of a group that has helped to settle 3 families. We had about 4 weeks notice the first time. And what we did was to get a group of congregations together to raise the funds and find the volunteers necessary. One of the most inspiring things about this work is its collaborative nature. In our case, 3 synagogues, 2 churches, and a humanist group. They represent well over 1,500 Westchester residents, and this community of congregants and friends raised over the projected suggested amount of $25,000 to be able to support our first family that first year. It was the community that found volunteers to find and furnish the apartment. It was the community that enlisted over a dozen volunteers to help the mom and children begin learning English. The community came together to provide over 40 volunteers who drove family members to all the appointments. Even more thrilling really was to see the families, these volunteer families that wanted their children to meet these new neighbors, wanted to introduce them to all that Westchester County had to offer, and who wanted to share American holidays with them, as well as have them join celebrations of their own faith traditions. I have so many personal stories, and I know the other volunteers have theirs, but I'll just share 2 very quickly. One was the Afghan mom who came without speaking any English. And I found out that within a couple of days, she had gone out of the apartment, was going up and down Central Avenue, checking out the shopping in the stores without any English or any experience being out on her own, because of course in Afghanistan, the women need to wait until a male relative takes them. So she did that after like 3 or 4 days, and I was blown away. And the other story is that of her husband, who met the school bus on the first day that the children had attended school with tears in his eyes. And he's somebody who doesn't like to admit that he cries, so I'm blowing his cover on this. But he was crying because it was the first time that he knew for sure that his kids would arrive safely home at the end of a school day. The 12 months that we're supposed to be responsible for them has long since passed, but those who were once volunteers are now friends. And the father of this family said to me just last week, "Jane, it's been 4 years. We're no longer refugees. We are Americans." So those are my personal stories.
That's amazing. So true. That's beautiful. So many stories to tell. The longer we do this, the more there are. So thank you for that, Jane. I want to tell you something. This is a little bit of news, and I have permission, although I was going to share it even without permission, to share something about Catholic Charities Community Service. And Kelly Agnew-Barajas will give you that announcement.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having this beautiful event and for seeing so many friendly faces. And I know that each one of these squares represents hundreds of other community members that have been so supportive of our efforts over the years. You know, when Kathy contacted us back in 2016, we jumped into the work of expanding our office and our resettlement work, which had really been centered around New York City. and opened an office in Yonkers to continue resettling. My philosophy all the way through the Trump years was outlast. I never did make up t-shirts that said that, but I feel like I said I would, but unfortunately I didn't. I'm happy to share with you that our office, as of last week, has been officially reactivated as a resettlement site for FY21. Thank you for the applause. I'll give myself applause as well. So thanks to a lot of, idiosyncratic way that kind of some of the administrative stuff has worked out, we're able to reactivate our site. With all of the circumstances surrounding the low presidential determination this year, I don't want to give false hope that we're going to all of a sudden see an influx of refugees arriving. However, this positions us and ensures that we're back in the game. And most importantly, for those of you who are aware of some of the details on the Central American Minors Program, our office had done an incredible number of Central American minors applications to reunify children with their parents. Sorry, my 7-year-old in the background. With their parents here in Westchester, New York City. And so our work will allow those cases to be reactivated, begin processing, and we're so pleased. I just want to thank also Sam Hepdig, who's also on the call, who's our resettlement supervisor in Yonkers and knows many of you. So thank you so much for all your support, and we're so looking forward to better times ahead.
Yeah, certainly, Kelly, the signs of spring are everywhere with that news. And, we won't get our hopes up, but we will get our plans made. And, Hearts and Homes has been seeding and cultivating more community sponsors. Sophia Goring Piard from AKA, who is a partner, in our work, and so much of our wraparound services and drives and things, said that AKA stands willing to support community sponsorship. So the more the merrier, and we will continue to find and ferret out and cultivate and grow those community sponsors. So glad you're going to have an office, and I know that IRC and HIAS are always looking, and we hope to be able to do the same with them here in Westchester County, because as you all know, we're not going to be able to resettle refugees without our partners. They are so invaluable in the work we do to co-sponsor refugees. So. And in the last 4 years, there hasn't been a lot of resettlement. So what do? We had to pivot. This organization, the volunteers, et cetera, had to come together and support the communities we aimed to assist: refugees, asylees, and asylum seekers. And so Hearts and Homes is a number of programs, but just a couple I wanted to highlight tonight. And starting with our signature Helping Hands program, which again is in partnership with primarily Catholic Charities. Here to talk about that are board members Lisa Kiernan and Lori Hasp, and they have a very special guest to introduce.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. Before we start, I just wanted to introduce Isatou Dukureh, who knows firsthand what Helping Hands does, and we'll let her speak first.
My name is Isatou, and I'm from Gambia. I flew to the US from my first arranged marriage and also core practice of female genital mutilation. I came to US to seek refuge and also hope to have a better life here and have a chance of helping others, particularly women that have experienced harmful traditional practice such as FGM, which is female genital mutilation, and other things. I was lucky to be part of Hearts and Homes for Refugee beneficiary through community sponsorship programs. I was matched with local churches that support me to transition and also integrate into this society. And most importantly, my education and my journey to become a healthcare provider to support other women. The support from this team of volunteers at this community level helped me to maximize my potential and also hope to become a valuable member of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Isatou. So wonderful to hear you speak about your experience and what you're doing now. Thank you. You know, nothing feels better than directly assisting a refugee family to become self-sufficient. That's what our Helping Hands volunteers tell us, and that's what they do. The program, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, involves matching a refugee family that has short-term needs with a volunteer team. And that team can be from a church or a synagogue or a civic group, or even a family or a group of friends. Most of the time we work with Catholic Charities. Thank you, Kelly and Sam and Adriana and all the others at Catholic Charities. They identify the family, and together we create a wish list of items and services that the family needs. And then we have a volunteer team that we've matched with the family, get together. And then it's up to the volunteer team to fulfill those wish list needs, usually over a time span of 2 to 3 months. So it's, as I said, short-term effort. The Hearts and Homes Helping Hands program is really a rewarding and meaningful way to support our new neighbors. And it also gives the helpers so much back in return. I think Lisa will take it from here and talk a little bit about what we've accomplished this past year.
Lisa, you need to unmute.
Do you want me to? Okay, but Lisa, I'll tell you what Lisa was gonna say. You could mouth it with me, Lisa. How does that work? We work so well together, we can do that. To give you an idea of what our Helping Hands team has our teams have accomplished in 2020, 10 volunteer teams provided support to 20 families that comprise 37 adults and 25 children. The 10 amazing teams provided nearly $17,000 in goods, and Hearts and Homes, the organization ourselves, procured another $10,000 worth of goods. So these included bedding and school supplies, clothing, furniture, computers, air conditioners, bus passes, gift cards, and more. When needed, volunteers also did things, and every wish list is different, every family's needs is different, to draw clients to doctor's appointments, to assist with housing and job searches, and that sort of thing. If needed, Hearts and Homes also has been working very hard with Lisa as one of the main drivers of this, to arrange for English as second language tutoring with Jane Dixon, I just want to mention, who spoke earlier. Our Helping Hands volunteers contributed altogether nearly 1,000 hours of volunteer service in 2020, which is so valuable and so much appreciated. We look forward to accomplishing even more in 2021 with your help, everyone who's here today, and more. Thank you.
So in addition to the welcoming actions, obviously advocacy is a really important part of our work, and many of you have been part of these advocacy actions over the years. This has included, well, tonight, meeting locally within our own communities, with community members, with local elected officials, events, social media, and for some of us, meeting local lawmakers in Washington. Kathy, Isatou, and myself were able last week to join a meeting through Refugee Council USA with a representative from Senator Gillibrand's office. And I would like to introduce another very important voice, new voice here in Westchester that's advocating, which is WJCI. Holly?
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, Kathy. And I agree with Representative Jones that there's no place I would rather be than here in this room with you and so many friends and peers who are engaged in immigration space in Westchester. Westchester Jewish Coalition for Immigration, WJCI, is so proud to be part of the grassroots welcoming movement. Our mission is to advocate for fair, just, and compassionate laws, policies, and programs to support refugees, asylum seekers, and other immigrant groups. We currently consist of over 100 individual members, including clergy from across the Westchester Jewish community, including conservative, Orthodox, Resurrectionist, Reform, and non-denominational affiliations. And I'm very proud to say that some members are here tonight, including Lori. Thank you so much, Lori Hosp, who's so pivotal to this work and our work and everything else. And I wanted to tell you a little bit more about WJCI. As a community, WJCI members come together regularly to advocate, organize, and act. As a Jewish organization, our core values, particularly tzedakah, charity, chesed, loving kindness, and tikkun olam, repairing the world, provide an ethics-based framework for motivating our community to channel obligation into action. Now more than ever, we must say, here I am, to those who need our help. Our common values and history provide a framework and structure for how we get organized. During Highest Refugee Shabbat, for example, we helped coordinate speakers and events in synagogues around the country, county. And it was so encouraging to know that over 30 synagogues were telling stories and celebrating the topic of immigration that weekend. And we're also hosting a countywide Zoom event to educate our community about how to advocate and provide critical support for families with immigrant children impacted by the situation at the southern border on June 6th. I'll drop that link in the chat box in just a moment. And we're so pleased to have Hearts and Homes Westchester Refugee Initiative as a partner. And we look so forward to future collaborations together. And thank you so much for putting together this wonderful evening. Feel free to email me at wjciorg@gmail.com, and I'll drop that into the chat box too. Thank you so much.
Holly, thank you so much. It is so important, this work. You know, not one person, not one group, not one organization can do it all. So, and as the Congressman referenced earlier, and we've said from day one, collaboration is what will strengthen and make this a sustained and important long-term, forever part of Westchester County. So thank you for what you all are doing. Finally, we're about to wrap it up. Unless Amy flags me and says there's something I've forgotten, but you know, as you can see, and as you've heard, the seeds of welcoming have been planted here and they will continue to grow. Our vision is of a long-term, sustainable, deeply rooted, partner-filled community of welcomers. We have and we will continue to cultivate more informed, welcoming people of goodwill and partners through community outreach and education programs. We will have more community sponsor groups. We hope that tonight gets people thinking a little bit more about it. And we welcome invitations to present to your community, your faith group, your civic groups, your library, your Rotary clubs, your book groups, your neighborhood associations. We've done it all. We've been everywhere. And that is what's going to grow this movement in Westchester County. So as we build back better in this country with this administration, and I think we will continue to assist our new neighbors as well as the receivers, all of you who are looking to engage with aspiring Americans. And we'll invite newcomers to the table, and we'll rely on our many experienced partners to help us. Together, we can bring the full weight of our community grassroots to this movement. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to
And I do want to say something before people sign off, because there are some ways right away that people can take action. So I would like to mention there's a new program, the assistance to SIVs, the special immigration visa holders that Kathy mentioned earlier in the call, our allies in Afghanistan. We have advocated for them over the years, very strongly, but now there's an opportunity for volunteers to work with individual cases. So there is also, I'm going to put in the chat how you can sign up for a Zoom that's on April 29th at 7 p.m. to learn about how you can advocate for individual cases. I also dropped into the chat a file, which is our the flyer for a spring cleaning winter drive for winter coats and boots. This is in collaboration between Hearts and Homes for Refugees and Neighbors for Refugees. And we will be accepting coats and boots on May 1st. And finally, there is also, I want to let you know that we will have, with Mother's and Father's Day around the corner, we have a special giveaway on our website for donations of $50 or more. We have note cards made out of the painting collection by Lori Kapner-Haas. I'm actually going to put the spotlight back on her for just a second. You can see some of these paintings right behind her. And so a box of 28 note cards for donations of $50 or more. And an announcement on behalf of Jamaal Bowman that he's also hosting a town hall tomorrow with some other representatives from Westchester, including from here in Mamaroneck, Durandi Martinez from the Community Resource Center. So I will put that in the chat as well. Thank you.
Our own Vanna White here. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. I just want to finish by saying I am proud to be in community with you every day on all of this. And thank you. We look forward to continuing conversations and the work.